a legendary sword that knights can only dream of, countless and shining jewels that can dazzle, and a unique and mysterious place where unknown powers lurk. So where is it all located? There is only one correct answer: a dungeon. But among the many dungeons was a place that was given the name Legendary Level. This place is the dungeon of the flame dragon Helga. Many people went to conquer this legendary dungeon. Brave warriors, the strongest living witches, even the troops of a great empire. However, all that was left after their campaigns was a handful of ashes. Therefore, one can't help but wonder who was able to conquer this dungeon after all. After all, the person who conquered this legendary dungeon dragon flame Helga was not some brave warrior or even a general, but some weirdo researcher named Edmond Dante. All he was interested in was traveling the world and researching magic crystals. A simple crystal researcher. To the legendary dragon Bloodstone, he descended into this dungeon. It was impossible not to think of him as a madman. He simply approached the dragon with a calm gait, without coming up with any attack tactics or anything. The dragon immediately reacted to the appearance of such an impudent man in his dungeon. Edmund, on the other hand, only said that he was as big as they say he is, a true madman. But what happened after that is not known, only rumors. But in the end, he came back safe and sound. Everyone was very surprised when he returned home. Later, based on his research on the dragon Bloodstone, he conducted various researches, which led him to an amazing discovery. This discovery shone so brightly that the night parted before its light. Edmund has created a great crystal that has the power to change the world. The name of this crystal is Ether. Our time, the deserted streets of an almost abandoned and destitute village, and a boy sitting at perhaps the only important landmark in the village, a monument to a great man, a man who changed the world with a single crystal, Edmond Dante. The boy, looking at the monument, was in awe, because it was his idol. He also brought the collected stones and looked at them, standing at the monument, and then he went about his business. Undoubtedly, this great man and the legends about him changed the fate of this guy. Afterward, the lad shows the elder his findings. He puts one of the pebbles in one of the pots with the withered flower, and water starts to come out of his modified pebble little by little. The elder notes that little Sage has very dexterous hands. He wonders how Sage did it. The boy, however, says that it wasn't hard. He used the ether of water and the ether of expansion to do it. He just combined the two ethers. He tried putting the expansion ether where the water should come out. It occurred to him that with this method, it would reproduce itself even if the magic power was almost exhausted. Thanks to this, he believes that this farm will be able to last a little longer. As we learn, this guy's name is Sage, also known as the errand boy. The old man says it's good, but he's not sure if the crops will survive this year, as this is the third year of such an attack. Suddenly, men in armor arrive and ask what the headman is doing. The headman recognizes them. They are Lloyd and Butch. He wonders how they came to be here. Lloyd and Butch belong to the Wolves Guild. They tell the old man they caught him, that he's trading ether without the guild's knowledge. The old man can't justify himself, and the man is tired of telling the old man already, and he doesn't understand how to explain to him already so that the old man understands him. That ether and magic crystals are different things, a mysterious metal that is melted not by magical power, but by spell, and who could fail to like the use of magic without the power of a wizard? After all, this is the pinnacle of magical refining technology, and it's not some defective trinket made from trash. And his gaze drops to the boy and his flower pot. The headman begins to complain that he can't afford the price the guild has set, and if things continue like this, the old man will be killed by the guild rather than die from the drought. A member of the guild complains that the old man is overreaching, and hasn't the old man forgotten thanks to whom his field is fighting against drought for the third year already? And if the old man is not satisfied, then let him deal with it himself without their help. If, of course, the old man has enough strength to cope with the anger of the leader of the Bulg Guild. He wonders if the headman would be willing to ruin the village as a sign of his ingratitude, while constantly mocking the old man. Then he turns his attention to the boy. He finds out if the boy is Sage. And when the boy wonders if the man knows him, Lloyd says he doesn't care. He says that there are already rumors about the boy. Rumors that there is no other errand boy who dreams of becoming the second peacekeeper. that he's studying magic crystals with findings that turned out to be discarded on the road. Plus, Lloyd has heard that the kid is helping villagers make fake ether. The head of the guild, Bulg, is very concerned about this kid, because he's causing the guild's ether sales to drop. So Lloyd points the boy to his place. The boy is too young to realize how cruel the world is. The boy has no choice but to apologize. After all the moralizing, Lloyd says that he will turn a blind eye today. But in exchange, the guy has to help them with something. After all, the signals are coming in that some suspicious type has appeared in the dungeon, and since Lloyd heard that the boy was a guide to the dungeon they need, he asks them to guide them through the underground labyrinth, making even the boy an offer the latter can't refuse. If the boy finds some crystals there, he can just take them for himself, but he will have to be a little quiet for a while, because Lloyd might be in trouble because of the crystals that suddenly appeared. The boy's eyes glow brighter at this suggestion of the long-awaited crystals he will be able to get. Sage bows to the headman, and he agrees to send him on his way. The boy then calls Lloyd, who has already left the village with Butch, and says he agrees and will go with them. The men are surprised that he agreed so easily. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, someone with a frantic look and a hammer in his hands is having a good time, and we learn why Lloyd and Butch were so surprised when Sage agreed to go to the dungeon with them, and also why they called him. In the dungeon, Sage managed to escape from them. However, Lloyd eventually manages to find Sage, and he breaks the barrel the boy was hiding behind, and who had already decided that he was going to die here today. That's what shiny rocks can do. Sage asks why they did this to him. The boy begs for mercy, and remembers that they said he only needed to guide them through the maze. However, Lloyd yanks him back, stating that he is so naive. After all, their original purpose was to lure the young man into the dungeon, because even good people need to know their place, and to find out if he heard what Mr. Bulg said. And Mr. Bulg, the leader of their guild, has decided that Sage is interfering with their business, so he needs to be done away with, and Lloyd is going to enforce the order. And don't give him that annoying face, because it's all his own fault. It's his fault he has nothing and is poor. I mean, he did it to be a peacemaker, so he should know his place. And Lloyd bids him farewell, while cleaving the guy with his sword. However, right above the guy's head, the sword suddenly stops. As it turns out, he was blocked by the previously shown guy with the hammer, who they were most likely supposed to head to the dungeon for. Sage is saved at the last moment, noting that the guy who saved him has a stone hammer. Lloyd and Butch wonder who this stranger is and where he came from. Noting that no one ever wanders into this dungeon, they continue to ask who this stranger is. Sage himself can't take his eyes off his savior. The stranger himself resents the question of who he is, stating that he is the blacksmith they passed by, and now what? Lloyd and Butch are surprised that the red-haired kid turned out to be a blacksmith. Lloyd then tells him that if he's a blacksmith, he knows that blacksmiths make swords like that. The blacksmith agrees, and then adds that he doesn't like the tone in which they are talking to him. Lloyd, however, tells him that they're on duty now, so the guy should pretend he didn't see anything and go on his way. Smith, on the other hand, parries by saying that, and if he doesn't want to do that, then what happens? Lloyd thinks he has no choice, and so he swings his sword towards the blacksmith, trying to impale him, and with a shout for the blacksmith to burn in hell. However, something happened that no one could have expected. The blacksmith guy just bit the sword that was trying to cut him. Lloyd, Butch and Sage were just incredibly shocked at what they saw, and the blacksmith just started chewing on the part of the sword he bit off, noting that the flavor of this sword was just awful, since the metal used was the cheapest. And then in just an instant, he knocks Lloyd out, telling that seaweed head to go to sleep. Butch, on the other hand, is not left after this picture, and visibly stuttering orders the blacksmith to stop, tells him not to move and asks him what guild he's from. That the guy crossed the wrong people, he should realize that. After all, attacking them is like declaring war on the guild leader, Mr. Bulg. He tells the blacksmith to stand still if he cares about his life. However, he doesn't have time to finish his sentence as someone's hand rests on his shoulder, from those who came up behind him and he didn't even notice. And trying to ask who they are, he also does not have time to speak, and he is knocked out by the blacksmith, who complains that the guy talks too much, and he is tired of listening to it. And if he was going to attack, he should have done so. Lloyd and Butch are stripped of all their armor, if this pile of metal could be called armor, and then tied up and left in the dungeon while they're still unconscious. Sage thanks the guys for saving him, because thanks to them he's still alive. He doesn't even know how he can repay them for saving him. The guy to the right of the blacksmith says that this is what any brave warrior would do. However, the blacksmith is surprised that the guy is proud of anything, since he did all the work himself. The lad says he is a blacksmith named Mara, travels the country and mends weapons. A traveling blacksmith named Mara Havel. He then introduces his men. The guy's name is Fennel, and the girl's name is Mace. They are traveling with the blacksmith. Mara has heard that Sage is also interested in the crystals, so he needs to be careful. After all, no matter where he goes, people like Lloyd and Butch will meet him anywhere. To which all Sage does is apologize. Mace tugs at the blacksmith's clothes, but he tells her that he understands, and that he was about to move out himself. Sage wonders in his thoughts what happened, and what they had that was so urgent. Mara tells him one last time to be careful. It's time for them to go down, so he has to get out of the dungeon. When they have already started their move, Sage asks them to stop. Mara says that they've had enough thanks from him, but the guy denies it, because that's not why he called out to them. He just wanted to let them know that they were going the other way. The whole company is disappointed, because they wanted to get away with it, but they just screwed up. So they consider giving up showing off and just going for it. Sage reports that he apologizes, but he can hear everything. The company reminisces about how they were wandering through all these mines and going in circles in this dungeon. Mara notes that this seems to be the 9th time, and if you count the fact that they came here for this boy, that makes 10. Mara notes that the last time was Fennel's mistake, and he wonders where the silverware is. Fennel, however, says with undisguised optimism that there's no need to remember the past. Sage, on the other hand, turns his attention to himself, saying that with this maze, he can probably help them. The company stops from their bickering and wonder how he can do it. The boy asks them to wait a moment, and then pulls a stone out of his pocket, saying that with this, they immediately recognize the stone, noting that is it really the ether of direction, and where did he get it from then? But they immediately notice that it's fake, and that there's even glue marks right there. Sage stops them, however, because he vouches for the functionality of this stone, because it is the stone that made him a guide in this dungeon. It's just recycled ether thrown away by the valiant warriors, but they're right, it's nothing like a replica. This did not add to the confidence the entire company had in this product, and it still stood at 0. Mara even notes that marketing is definitely not for the boy, but he thanks the boy for caring. The spell underlying ether's direction is one of the most complex, so there is no chance that this pebble in his hands will work as it should. But before he can say anything, the pebble points in the direction they're going, much to the surprise of everyone present. Sage notes that they should look at it. He said it would work, and then tells them to go this way. The others are still surprised that the pebble works. Meanwhile, Lloyd, after receiving a blow to the head and having his sword bitten off, seems to finally be coming to his senses. He's got a look of unease on his face that makes a vein swell on his forehead. Sage leads Mara, Fennel, and Mace to some grand and gigantic stone gates with what looks like a picture of someone's face on them. The boy reports that everyone who came here went down this thing. Fennel notes that the boy is cool. After all, he's the reason they got here. Mara, however, is interested in something else. He marvels and wonders. Because it's a composite design, but it works, and that it's impossible to craft something like this without knowing the exact proportions. That's why he's surprised, because a boy untrained in magical synthesis was somehow able to craft this. Mara notes that the boy is nimble. He even asks if the boy wants to be part of the guild. Sage says he does, and even admits honestly that he applies to different guilds every year, but so far he hasn't been accepted anywhere. He helps the villagers with various things, so he learns about magic crystals willy-nilly. He would like to save up money and learn magical synthesis properly. After all, he has a dream. He wants to become a peacemaker, just like Edmond Dante was. However, everyone was surprised by his words, and as if dumbfounded from hearing the fiery speech of the guy. Sage doesn't understand what happened and why they are looking at him like that. Mara is aflame at the words he heard. Fennel even tells Mara to calm down, and Mace puts her finger to her lips, showing him to be quiet. Mara walks up to Sage with all his menacing looks, and says that whether he wants to or not, as long as Mara is around, there is a name that is forbidden for him to say, and that name is Edmond Dantes. He wonders if he's realized that. Sage was more than a little startled by this reaction. Even Fennel came over and asked the blacksmith to calm down and not get so worked up over the guy. Mara finally came to his senses and admitted that he was just suddenly angry. Then he told him with undisguised hatred that he couldn't stand the bastard, or rather the man, so he asks that the boy not mention that name when he's around. Sage decides he'll remember that. Fennel pulled out 2 axes from somewhere and pounded them away from each other, going to cut his way into a bright future straight to the temple, deciding to go out in the style of valiant warriors. Mace, on the other hand, met this with a poker face and silence, but it seems the first thing a valiant warrior needs to do is look under his feet, since he stepped in the wrong place, because the entire dungeon suddenly shakes. Sage assumes it's an earthquake. Fennel, on the other hand, expects an enemy that is raring to attack. Mara, on the other hand, guesses that the epicenter is the very heart of the dungeon. He doesn't like all this and he wants to hurry. The blacksmith informs the group that their plans are changing, but he doesn't have time to say anything further, as he also stepped in the wrong place. The floor beneath him and Sage collapses, leaving a giant hole into which the blacksmith and the boy fall. Mace and Fennel rush to the hole and call out to the guys, who are already falling. However, in flight, Mara notices that a piece of the dungeon falls on his companions as well, which he yells to them. They only have time to turn around as a huge chunk of the dungeon falls on top of them, causing a huge wave of dust. It's hard to survive after such a blow. Sage screams incredibly loudly as he falls, tears streaming from his eyes as he's about to die. It's impossible to survive the fall. Mara tells him to shut up. It's loud enough as it is. He grabs the guy by the scruff of the neck. He has to save him somehow. And then he yells, "Lengthen Tabasco," and his hammer lengthens incredibly. The guy who just cried and squealed somehow also notices the blacksmith's hammer lengthening. Thanks to the lengthening of his hammer, the blacksmith manages to slow down the speed of their fall. Thus began this adventure story about a guild of blacksmiths called Red Pepper, the beginning of which was marked by the clanging of the hammer. They managed to land successfully, and the guy from Such Flights and Overloads tries to hold back his gagging, but he can't hold back his gagging and ends up throwing up. Smith even taps him lightly on his back, helping him out. After Sage is released, they look around, trying to figure out where they are, and Mara covers her anger, lamenting that they seem to have been separated from the rest of the companions. And the boy wonders what it might be worth to use the hammer again. The blacksmith will lengthen it, and they'll go back. Mara asks him, is he talking about Tabasco? The boy is surprised that he calls the hammer Tabasco. The blacksmith then confesses that he forged this magical hammer himself. Its length and size can be adjusted, but it has a limit. He asks Sage to look up, noting that who knows how this whole mountain of rocks would collapse if he hit it, summarizing that at this rate, Fennel and Mace won't be able to join them quickly. He wonders what could have caused such an earthquake. The answer to the question of interest arrived immediately. Behind them, purple lightning shone very brightly, much to Sage's surprise. He didn't realize what it even was just now, but as soon as he turned around, the purple lightning was already flying towards him. He tried to instinctively cover his face with his hand. The last thing he heard was, "Absorb them, Bergamot," and something absorbed the violet lightning attack that came from the unknown. He opened his eyes to see something he didn't understand. Was it some kind of shadow? But the blacksmith standing next to him reassured him that he shouldn't worry because it wouldn't hurt him. He even tells Sage to say hello, because it's Bergamot, the guild mage. Bergamot doesn't understand why he was woken up. The boy, on the other hand, is more surprised not that he just survived, but that the shadow can talk. Mara tells him that he usually hides in his shadow. Besides, Bergamot is a creepy egomaniac, but his skills are too good. Bergamot, however, only has to grumble that the blacksmith has time to joke around. The blacksmith, on the other hand, starts warming up, and since this is the case, they need to think positively. They've already gotten there, which means they just need to deal with everything quickly and get back. Sage is still at a loss as to what to deal with. Mara says that he may have forgotten to tell, but the reason they showed up in this dungeon is because they came for the magic stone and points to the glowing something in front of them. But the kid still doesn't quite understand. Then, to make him understand, the blacksmith asks him if his village has been suffering from a severe drought lately. The boy wonders how he knew that. Then Mara decides to tell him. The number of villages suffering from famine and drought has been increasing lately. And after they investigated, they found out that all these villages had one thing in common. Radiating a dubious purple color, an unknown dungeon would appear nearby, just like the dungeon near the kid's village appeared. He then pointed at a thing sparkling with purple lightning and said that that thing was the main magic stone of the dungeon. They gave this magic stone a name, Aronia. The boy wonders what exactly this stone is doing to his village. Mara, however, says that they no longer have time for such leisurely chatter. After all, they need to hurry, for if left to their own devices, Aronia will explode very soon. They need to stop it as quickly as possible. Fennel and Mace have had too busy a day as well. They're still running from the rockfall. Fennel is worried because the earthquake is only getting worse and whether their head will be okay. Mace, on the other hand, just tells him to think better of himself. Plus, it's like he doesn't know that those two are going to have the easiest time escaping. But judging by the magnitude of the earthquake, it seems to her that Aronia is going to explode very soon. And if Mara were here, the first thing he'd do would be to try to disperse it. She wondered if Bergamot would be able to manage alone in Mara's cover. As they ran towards the exit of the dungeon, they noticed that those two, Lloyd and Butch, were gone. Only the ropes were left of them. Concluding that it looked like they had escaped, considering how shaky the dungeon was, if it were them, no one would just sit there and try to escape from the dungeon. Eventually, after their running, Mace is tired. She feels that she can't go on like this anymore, or else she'll be stuck here forever. So she asks Fennel to lend her the belt. Fennel tries to ask why she needs his belt, but he doesn't get a chance to say anything as she grabs his belt and drags him behind her, rushing forward. Mace wasn't at all concerned about the condition of the one she was carrying by his belt, so Fennel counted absolutely every rock, bump and earth that came their way. It was actually faster than when they ran Oas Fennel's speed, and that, it was barely enough for them, and they made it out of the dungeon. When they finally stopped, Mace noted that they had barely escaped, and finally wondered about the health of the one she was carrying, and if he was okay. Fennel, on the other hand, complains that he has a headache. Mace then notes that means he's fine. This pisses Fennel off, and he starts yelling at the girl, that if she was going to fly, she should have warned him in the first place. However, the girl parries that he's a retard. Fennel denies it while blood pours out of his mouth. She just doesn't understand him. After all, if he knew he was going to fly, he would be able to assume the pose of a hero, like he's some kind of superhero. This speech now made Mace start to grumble that he was definitely an idiot for getting upset just because of this. But they were interrupted by a purple glow. The guy wondered to the girl if she had ever seen such a thing. And what's even going on? Mace doesn't understand either. She's seeing something like this for the first time. But only one thing is clear to her from all this. If it explodes, the whole area around it will be blown away. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Sage's panic is disturbing the blacksmith with her questions. What do you mean it's going to explode? So, this thing's going to explode. Sage is already freaking out because he's too close to Aconia. Then Mara sees this and asks Bergamot to do him a favor, but he immediately refuses. He realizes that Mara is going to ask him to protect the little guy. And is he even in his right mind? If Fennel and Mace aren't there and he's going to leave the boy to Bergamot, so he's going to clear the dungeon alone. Bergamot realizes that Mara is worried about the boy, but he should also not forget the pact they have. If Bergamot notices even the slightest chance of failure and fails to achieve his goal, he will finish the boy off in a flash, right there on the spot. So what does the boy who is at the epicenter of the explosion do? No, he's not rushing to run away and take cover behind something and stay out of the way since they can't leave the place. He tries to listen to what Mara and Bergamot are talking about. Smith notices that they don't stand a chance. The earthquake has already sealed the place. He can definitely clean it up. Bergamot advises him to pull himself together right now. Despite everything, however, Mara prepares for battle and still asks Bergamot to take care of the boy. With all the discontent, he doesn't even hide it and wishes the blacksmith good luck, and the man only says he's counting on Bergamot. Bergamot flew over to Sage and used a protective and transparent dome on him, scaring the poor guy again, who was clearly having a bad day and had almost met his death time and time again today. The blacksmith, noticing that Sage is protected, tries to pacify the stone by using Tabasco's magic hammer and the art of melting in flames, and with all his might, he strikes the stone with his hammer while holding it down with his tongs. The lad, seeing nothing of his village, is once again surprised. What is this style of forging? Bergamot calms him down and tells the lad to sit quietly, as he has only one job, to sit inside the protective dome. Suddenly a cloud covers them. The guy notes that it's smoke. Bergamot confirms the guy's assumption and corrects him, as it's called graphite, and then adds that when Aronia is hit, it releases smoke for its own defense. Bergamot even smiles, saying that the guy better not even touch anything, especially if he's human. The guy gets scared and asks how dangerous it is. However, Bergamot is amused, replying that if he's really curious, he can run in there and check it out. The guy is a very nice person, so he wonders. Since it's dangerous, it turns out Mara is in danger. Bergamot reassures him again, because if he's worried that something will happen to Mara from this, then he shouldn't worry, because he'll be fine, revealing Mara's secret a bit, as he notes that Mara is not an ordinary person. These words make the guy wonder what an unusual person means, as well as who Mara really is. However, contrary to what Bergamot says, the blacksmith has a very hard time. As he himself notes, this is the first time he encounters such resistance, as if the magic stone is resisting him of its own accord. After another blow, the stone's resistance succeeds, as it is able to throw the blacksmith some distance away from himself. Mara tries to stand up again. Meanwhile, the guy is thinking that at this rate, the very explosion Mara warned him about will happen, and if the explosion does happen, it will destroy everything around him. What then will become of his village and its people? Despite the poverty and problems of the village, he still loves the village, and he is close to the other villagers and would not want them to die. So the guy, despite his fear, starts to believe in his exceptionalism and decides to stop this cursed stone by all means. And so he breaks out of the protective dome and with his bare hands throws himself at the sparkling and shining stone. The kid grabs the tongs that were just thrown in his direction, then runs up to the stone and grabs Aronia with those tongs. Bergamot and Mara are greatly surprised at this unexpected turn of events. However, they don't have time, so Sage yells for Mara to hit Aronia while he holds on to the tongs himself. Mara is still worried about the guy and tells him to leave immediately. But Bergamot tells him not to waste his energy yelling, because it's too late. The guy has already entered the graphite. For all the blacksmith's indignation, he asks him to pay attention to the boy, who is already starting to eat away, and that this guy is about to turn into a demon. What a good blacksmith and time to talk. Sage, meanwhile, sinks into the darkness until he is completely engulfed in darkness, where he hears a figure searching for him and calling his name. The figure from the darkness says that he has found him, that he is a worthless child with no parents. And did he really think his diligence would get him anywhere? He must have known he was hopeless, but he pretended to be so caring and kind, and that he's sickening to look at. That's why he should die, because his hypocrisy is unbearable. The voices in his head kept mocking him and telling him to die, and what a loser he is. Let him just die. However, in spite of all these voices, the guy takes himself in hand with his last strength and tries to hold on to his consciousness, trying to deny what the voices from the darkness are telling him. Mara and Bergamot certainly didn't expect this, so they become stunned. Bergamot doesn't understand what's going on. Is this guy really letting graphite through him? Bergamot wonders to Mara, what will he do in this situation? But Mara doesn't understand the question. It's obvious. He'll just finish what he started. He grabs his Tabasco hammer, which shines golden in the rubble of the dungeon, and then decides to use his Tabasco hammer in max mode, turning it into a huge hammer. Mara then asks the guy what his name is, taking the time, of course. The kid replies that his name is Sage. The blacksmith points out that the guy is a very interesting person, the kind of person who is immune to graphite, and also that he should not disappoint him, and that he shouldn't relax now and let the graphite consume him. He swings this huge hammer and advises the guy to hold the stone as tightly as possible, and then he uses the fire forging technique, and with all his might, He strikes a small pebble. The light poured straight into the sky, illuminating everything around the dungeon for miles. It even seemed to blind. The rock itself turned into a very small and smooth pebble. And the guy who had the hardest day of his life, when the adrenaline wore off, noticed that he had no more strength, and all his strength had left him. He's glad they were able to prevent the explosion after all. And he was able to save the villagers. He's glad that he was able to do all of this no matter what. And now he can rest, and his body starts to fall. But he manages to be picked up by Mara with his right hand. Even though Sage has already lost consciousness, the blacksmith is still burning that the kid did well, calling him by name. After a while, he regains consciousness and catches this picture of Fennel poking him with a stick. Sage immediately jumps up sharply with a scream. This causes Fennel to note that he seems to be feeling better. Sage then notices Mara in front of him making some kind of soup. The guy is surprised, and at the same time glad that he's still alive and not dead after all. The guy is fed, but the ungrateful brat starts complaining that it's too spicy. And how can they even eat such things? Mara is surprised at such statements from the guy, and it seems that he just has no taste, and then takes out a vial with a picture of fire on it, and then pours all this red nuclear mixture into his soup. Just by looking at what the blacksmith did and seeing all that infernal mixture, the guy is already starting to feel sick. He wonders what it is, and he is informed that it's ground chili pepper. Fennel thinks that Sage must be really hungry, so he should eat the whole thing, despite the guy's indignation that it's very spicy. He bluntly insists that the guy shouldn't be embarrassed, but Sage still refuses, and that he really can't eat it. And Fennel keeps insisting, and that he shouldn't worry about them and eat it. After all, the more he eats, the less they'll get, and himself thinking about the fact that the hero can't skip meals. Mace, on the other hand, notes that he's an idiot and that's not the point. Fennel tries his best to escape, and thinks that the soup is cold, so he's going to run away and bring more branches. And Mara wonders where he's going all of a sudden. Sage, on the other hand, asks him to stop. Fennel doesn't manage to get far, so he's greeted by some huge shadow of a man, which covers him. Meanwhile, the blacksmith is talking to Sage, and although he has said it before, he thanks Sage again for his help, as thanks to him they have successfully neutralized Aronia. Therefore, his village should no longer have the problems that they had. Sage thanks him, but Mara points out that it's not worth the thanks, since that was his original purpose. He even asks to ask a question, and tries to find out what Sage will do next. The guy himself hasn't thought about it yet. The blacksmith, on the other hand, thought the guy was obviously in trouble, considering the position he found him in the dungeon in, and it was not clear to him if the guy could defend himself and not die. They continue on their way in search of Aronia. So what will he do after they have to leave? The guy only lowered his head in thought, which makes one notice in his mind that Sage doesn't seem to have thought about it himself. He only wants to say something to the guy, but suddenly Fennel flies past him and hits the tree behind his back. Mace immediately focused on the guest. The guy was startled, even dropped his spoon and looked only in the direction of Fennel. Then a guy comes out of the bushes grumbling that he had to drag himself because of some brats. He decides to ask if they had entered the dungeon without his permission. Next to him are old acquaintances Lloyd and Butch, who confirm that it was them, and when Sir Bulg asks about the leader, Lloyd confirms that it's that red-haired man with the contemptuous look. The man declares that how dare they mess with them in their guild territory, and that they can't leave here alive. And while he was saying these words, guild members began to appear from every bush and tree, clamping down on the entire group. Sage is surprised to see that Bulg, the Iron Fist himself, has arrived. Lloyd, who feels protected because of the guild leader, resents the red-haired man for thinking he could beat him and get away with it. It's too late for him to ask for mercy, and he's going to be killed along with Sage anyway. All of this only amused the blacksmith and made him smile. He's glad to see the dumbass again. The whole company was completely surrounded by Bulg's men from the guild. There was nowhere to run. Sage, on the other hand, was very startled when he saw the man. He had only heard of him, but this was the first time he had seen him. Bulg's iron fist seemed so huge to him. Looking at his new friend, Sage doesn't understand who he is at all, since he keeps smiling even in such a situation. Bulg decides to interrogate them first, and asks who they are and the purpose of their visit. Mara immediately tells him his name and that he is the head of the Red Pepper Guild. Also, that while traveling, they came across a strange dungeon and cleared it out. However, Bulg is furious at his words, saying that who asked them to protect them in the first place, and why are they even climbing into someone else's territory? Mara, on the other hand, doesn't understand why he's angry just because of that. Sage is trembling with fear and asks the blacksmith to calm down. After all, it's Bulg, the head of the Wolves Guild. He's too powerful. And the people who are with him are the guild's elite squad, so it would be better not to provoke them unnecessarily. All these words from Sage only make the blacksmith laugh, so Bulg has brought an elite squad with him. In that case, they can't just leave. He decides it's not a good idea to just talk and discuss things, scare them and stuff. It's a good time to fight. While everyone else is frozen, Mara yells to this entire guild that why are they standing? Since they came to fight, they should hurry up and start fighting, so let them attack. At the same time, Fennel finally gets up. He's so happy, since he doesn't even remember how long it's been since they fought anyone. Mara doesn't remember it either, but orders him to drop his axes and fight on his fists. Fennel accepts this, saying that he has no choice then, and then throws his axes to the ground. While the guild member watched Fennel warm up, they couldn't help but be surprised that he dropped his weapons. Could it be that the guy was so confident in hand-to-hand combat? After warming up, Fennel rushes at the enemy, shouting that a true warrior relies on more than just his weapon. One of the guild members tries to stop him. Some idle guild member dares not directly confront Lord Bulg. That man is the chief of the guard, Egnarius. He lashes out at the young man in front of him, because he should be punished immediately for such a prank. And who better than him, the chief of guards, to do it? He chops Fennel with all his might, but suddenly his sword shatters right in front of him. Lloyd and Butch were also shocked by this turn of events. Apparently, they were still fresh from the moment when Mara bit the sword Lloyd had attacked him with. While the chief of guards didn't realize what was going on, Fennel's fist had already hit him in the face and knocked him out. Fennel declares that something like this wouldn't work with him at all, but another guild member comes at him with an axe, claiming how dare he attack their boss, and also that he was obviously using some kind of trick. The poor axe guy is just in shock, since his axe isn't so new anymore, when it crashes into Fennel's neck and shatters. Fennel, on the other hand, points out that there is no trick, it's just the way he is. The rest of the guild doesn't understand what he's carrying at all. It turns out the sword doesn't work against him, so how can they fight against him then? Seeing how the sword and axe literally shattered when they hit the guy's body, even Bulg himself broke out in a cold sweat. Sage asks the blacksmith if Fennel's sword can't take Fennel's sword. Mara replies that it's as if he didn't see it himself, that even after all this, Fennel is fine. Bulg doesn't think he has time for the others to think, and wonders what his entire guild is doing and has everyone attack the aliens immediately. The whole guild, armed with spears, yes, swords, and in their armor, rushed at Fennel. However, when their spears hit the guy, their spears were blown to pieces. They even started complaining that it was ridiculous and they couldn't penetrate him with a spear. After a failed guild attack, the guy himself started grabbing and attacking guild members. Relying solely on his superior defense, he attacks fearlessly. And that's where Fennel's strength lies. But the guys in the guild were not bad either, since there were many of them. They all started to pounce on him and pelt him on the ground. Mara, watching the large number of guild members pounce on Fennel while talking to Sage, adds that Fennel's strength is actually average, so if he overdoes it, he'll only hurt himself. Sage then says that maybe we should help him then, but Mara stops him, saying that they can stay out of it for now, since they already have someone to attack. Mace enters the battlefield, who has also been watching from the sidelines the whole time. She blows everyone off the field with the wind. One guy even thought he was finished, and he said goodbye to everyone he could, and saw his whole life before his eyes when he saw a giant rock flying in front of him. When the raised dust finally began to settle, it saw something golden. From where it came from, it looked like all she could do. It turns out that the whole bunch was hiding behind a shield that guild leader Bulg had created. He informs Mace that the shield is made with ether defense magic, so if she wants to attack, let her try. As they say, no one pulled your tongue, Bulg. Mace only had to point her finger at the ground, and Bulg immediately went to kiss the ground when a rock fell on his head. She even thought he was a buffoon. After all, He's probably joking around and thinks he looks cool if all he had was a good magic item. She notes that while his entire guild was entertained by Fennel and they were pouncing on him, they had already had time to build up their positions here. It was only now that the people from the guild began to notice that there were many huge rocks flying in the sky. It seems that next time, this guild and its leader should first find out who they were dealing with before attacking. While the guild members were in shock and some started to run away, Mace started blowing all those rocks in the air after them. The blacksmith starts complaining about Mace because she has to watch what she's doing, so she shoots rocks without even aiming, and rocks are flying at them and Sage too. And here you can see that Mace is amazing too, not just Mara and Fennel. As you can see that the wind is coming right out of her hands. She orders them to stop and then lands herself, clearly displeased since they themselves talked her into attacking. Lloyd can't believe that all the guys from the guild have been dealt with so quickly. However, there is the very hope that keeps him from giving up, because Lord Bulg is with them. Lloyd of course tries to call out to his Lord Bulg, but Lord Bulg himself seems to be in a bad way and may have already passed out. Now it's up to the leader of the strangers, who states to Bulg that no matter how much he thinks about it, he still can't understand why they would have come this far. They're just a travelling guild, and the dungeon is already empty since they've cleared it out, and Bulg brought along an elite unit to catch them. Mara thinks that's kind of over the top, and Bulg looks like he's ready to wet his pants. Bulg doesn't understand what he means by why, isn't it obvious? Then Mara tells him himself. It was so important for them to protect this dungeon. After all, as long as it exists, the villagers buy food from them for their existence, and if their territory is too far from the village, you can then charge them extra under the guise of providing security. As long as the dungeon exists, the hunger will continue, which is what they want, since they plan to stay here and profit from the village for as long as they can. But this angers the blacksmith, because since they know about it, then they definitely know Aronia. Hell, the blacksmith has figured out the whole plan and everything Bulg has been up to here. He has no other choice then, and decides he's not going to let the blacksmith stay alive. He uses Bulg's special magic glove, with which he uses steel magic. The principle is simple. As much power as you have, that much power you can steal from your opponent and add to yours. This magic works up to 5 times. Bulg has no choice, because if today's incident reaches a group of people he fears, he's dead for sure. So whatever it takes, it can't happen. After all he had to go through to get where he is now. He's not going to let that red-haired guy ruin everything. Mara wondered what had even happened, because he's been a little sick to his stomach since that magic with the glove, and he tells Bulg to stop already. He's not going to hit him and asks him to relax, because he's only interested in information about Aronia that Bulg might know. But guild leader Bulg doesn't listen to him anymore, and believing in his miraculous gauntlet, he pounces on the blacksmith with a cry of "Die!" However, against all of Bulg's dreams, Mara hits him over the head with her hammer and seals Bulg into the ground, destroying a huge area around him. Sage still continues to have the most amazing day of his life. After all, Mara took out Bulg with an iron fist with a single blow, a Bulg that has been striking fear into the entire village for a long time. The blacksmith, however, is not happy about what happened. He said he only wanted an answer, so he doesn't understand why Bulg decided to do what he did. And next, we begin to delve into the memories of Wolves' guild leader, Lord Bulg. They were a private mercenary gang. Many of his guild members were constantly complaining because of the pay, that they had to wait for 2 months, and that anyone could have made some money in that time. Wolves' Guild had a life of running errands for high-ranking guilds. Just when Bulg himself already wanted to find a good job and settle down, a certain man found him. He knew that Bulg's name was Gary Bulg of the Wolves' Guild. He asked not to be frightened by Bulg, and that he had only appeared in front of him to offer him a job. This offer would change Bulg's life dramatically, and all he had to do was nothing. His guild could do it. Guarding the dungeon was all he had to do. And the way he looks at it, as it turned out, it was Bulg, covered in bruises, telling the blacksmith that he's been making himself the boss of this territory ever since. The ether supplied to the village, and even the gauntlet he used against them earlier, all provided by the group that put him in charge. He says something all he knows about everything, but Sage doesn't really believe him for some reason. Then Mara starts swinging his hammer, because Bulg seems to be joking. Doesn't he know anything about the man who offered him all this information? But Bulg tries to convince them that he's not lying, and that's all he knows. Mara, however, thinks that after a couple of hammer blows, Bulg might remember something else. But all that comes out of Bulg's mouth is a scream. Later, when they are resting near the village, Mara, lying on the grass, complains that he thought he had finally caught the leader, but it was all a waste of time. Fennel wonders that he didn't get any information at all. Mara then confirms it. Bulg didn't tell him anything else after they beat him up. So it turns out he really didn't know anything. So the guys who put Bulg in charge here are being overly cautious. While Mara was in his musings on dark matters, Sage returned. He gathered all the villagers as Sage had asked him to. The headman asks Sage who it is next to him. Sage then asks all the villagers to listen to him carefully. After all, the members of the Red Pepper Guild are in front of them. They saved his life and chased away the Bulgi. The headman marvels at the fact that they were able to defeat Bulg the Iron Fist, and that this is the best news he's heard in a while. Sage also tells the residents that thanks to the Red Pepper Guild, they got all the ether that the Wolves Guild monopolized. So from now on, they need to focus on rebuilding the village. The villagers are encouraged by the news they heard and make plans for the future. That they need to get the land cultivated and sown before winter. No sooner have they begun, however, than a serious question arises. How do they divide the ether? The fields are huge, but there isn't much ether, and given the situation of dividing the ether, the whole village could be at odds. Mara, on the other hand, reassures the villagers and tells them that they will solve even this problem. Whether the residents want to believe it or not, they are blacksmiths, so they will melt the ether and make something useful for the village out of it. When the villagers complain again, saying they don't have a forge, but Mara again dismisses their concerns and decides it's easier to show them that he doesn't care if they have a forge or not. He then summons Bergamot, who has already realized what Mara is about to ask of him. And then the villagers began to marvel at what happened next. From the huge shadow of the blacksmith, giant structures began to emerge one by one. Here came the anvil, and so gradually came out a huge forge, which looks like a whole mansion. The blacksmith calls Fennel and Mace because he has not stoked the forge for a long time. He inhales more air and then exhales flames from his mouth, melting the forge. Fennel was sent to cut trees and wood for the forge. Mace, on the other hand, with her marvelous hands and the wind coming from them, kept the flames from going out and fueled them even more. Sage can't stay away either, so the blacksmith throws him the tongs and asks him to help. After all, Sage wants to become a peacemaker. Then now is the perfect time to train him. But Sage thinks he'll only be a nuisance. Mara, on the other hand, standing at the anvil, tells him that she will teach him everything. So have him take the tongs and go to him to help. Making magic stones by eye is a different matter altogether, so let him watch carefully and memorize. Sage was so happy that no one had forgotten him, and he had a chance to learn something new. So they continued practicing until late into the night. And even after that they didn't stop, but continued forging. Mara advises Sage not to use only his hand strength, as the magic stone will continue to dangle, and that he should engage his shoulders and top, pushing lightly from above. Mace, meanwhile, had already gotten the hang of her job, and was only staring thoughtfully at the fire, fanning the flames from only one left hand. Fennel, meanwhile, was looking at the stars, and as it turned out, he was not alone. Suddenly he was looking at the night sky with the bear. But suddenly they noticed each other. As it turned out, they were not friends. So they began to fight, without even taking a balalaika in their hands or buying vodka and matryoshkas, and started dancing. It's strange even. And so the night went on, with Mace fanning the flames, Mara and Sage forging, and Fennel fighting a bear. The next morning, it was decided to reconvene all the villagers, to whom they were going to show the result of their efforts, and a stake was presented in front of the villagers, which they immediately recognized and didn't understand. Mara explains that yes, it is a stake that they made by their guild out of copper and ether. He then asks if Fennel is ready, and he replies that he is. That's when the residents notice that something strange is going on. Then they both drive into the ground, this miracle stake recently forged and shown to the public. Suddenly, the ground beneath the feet of the villagers glows with a bright green light. The villagers start to get frightened, as they don't understand what's going on. since they have been under the oppression of the Wolves Guild for so long. The headman asks what it is. Mara then explains that it is the Glide Ether. Ether contains the magic of regeneration and healing. Glide Ether promotes regeneration. They had just found a significant amount of Glide Ether when they defeated the Wolves Guild. It seems the guild was distributing it sparingly to capitalize on the village's drought. So the blacksmith and the others melted down the Glide Ether and placed it in the form of pegs around the village. Copper is one of the metals of high magical conductivity. By connecting them like a spider web, the healing magic will be evenly distributed across the fields, so it will allow the villagers to harvest at least one crop before the coming winter. The village headman doesn't even know how to choose words of gratitude. After all, Mara and her friends have solved the main problem of the village. The headman doesn't know how to thank them for such a good deed. But Fennel shouts that it's nothing, and it's all nothing, which can't help but irritate the blacksmith. By the way, after the night scuffle, Fennel seems to have found a common language with the bear. The headman, despite being shameless, wants to ask Mara for a favor. Mara wonders what other favor. And then the headman turns to Sage and asks that Mara and company take Sage with them. Even the kid is surprised at this sudden turn of events. The headman tells him that the kid was born an orphan, but grew up to be a good person. It is such a loss for him to stay in a place like their village, so he asks that they take Sage with them. The old man asks to at least take him to the kingdom of Martellia, so that the kid can take the entrance exam for the Guild Academy. After all, his last wish is to see Sage learn about the world. He asks the blacksmith for this favor. Sage, the good boy himself, was touched by such words, and Mara began to stare at the boy and remember the path they had traveled the previous day, that despite looking like a fool, the kid had definitely shown himself capable. He also remembers the kid grabbing the shields and holding Aronia. Despite the poisonous cloud around him, he let the graphite pass through him. Finally making a decision, Mara declares that the kid was lucky, as they were just on their way to the Martellia kingdom. Sage didn't know that. Fennel and Mace didn't seem to know anything about it either, because Fennel just opened his mouth to say, "What the hell is this nonsense?" as Mara quickly shut his mouth. So he once again says what the guy thinks about this scheme, and if he's ready to leave the village, and that now the choice is only Sage's. He can leave the village and find something to his liking. But the blacksmith doesn't force him to do anything, because he can also stay and help the villagers. The only thing Mara can tell him is that the world is full of magic stones that he hasn't seen yet, and that he can teach Sage how to work them. So Mara, as the head of the Red Pepper Guild, invites Sage to join his guild. Fennel, meanwhile, is happy that he's no longer a newbie. Mace, on the other hand, tells him to shut up. Mara tells Sage to join their guild as a blacksmith, and what does the would-be peacemaker say? After saying that he will see many stones he has never seen before, I think you already knew the answer. The whole village, remembering how this good-natured boy helped the villagers in every way, came out to say goodbye to him, saying many nice words to him. Sage says that he will definitely come back and that he will become a peacekeeper, and that the rest of the villagers should take care of themselves. Meanwhile, the blacksmith asks Fennel what the bear is doing next to them. Fennel says it's their comrade. His name is Sage, and from this day forward, he begins his journey to become a peacekeeper. The first achievement is accomplished. Sage has joined the Red Pepper Guild. Meanwhile, we move right into Sage's second day after joining the Red Pepper Guild. Their journey was quite tedious, as in the time they left Sage's village, they never encountered another village. Fennel is already complaining about how long they've been walking like this, and Sage suggests they try to look for a traveling crew. Fennel says that Sage is right, and they should really look for a hitchhiker, because he would like to have a good meal in some town. Mara is hungry himself. However, they have run out of money, so they need to figure something out right away. Fennel remembers that they took the money from the Wolves Guild, so where did it go? Mara, however, stops Fennel from thinking like that. How can that money be theirs? It's the villagers' money. That's why the blacksmith gave all the money to rebuild the village. Mara even complains that Bergamot for some reason doesn't want to help them with his magic and how this happened in the first place. He calls Bergamot over and over again, but he pretends as if he doesn't hear him. However, the guy knows he can hear him. He starts tapping his foot furiously on his shadow with an exclamation as to why Bergamot is ignoring him, that he only does things when he pleases. After these exclamations and that Mara was tapping his foot on the shadow, a shadowy hand stretched out from the shadow behind him and grabbed the blacksmith by the tail on his head and then flung him to the ground with lightning speed. This infuriated the guy even more, and he decides he's going to teach Bergamot a lesson, and that he's a moron. Mace, peeking among the trees, seems to have detected something with her intense gaze. She reports that there seems to be something going on, as there are a lot of people there. Sage immediately asks that maybe it's the crew. Then, placing her hands on the ground and feeling the ground shake, Mace leads them in the direction of where the supposed people are to find out what it is. Standing on a hillside, they caught a very strange sight. A lot of monsters were chasing a girl who was riding an animal, and they seemed to want to taste her. Mace even notes that at this rate the girl will definitely die. By this time, Mara has also approached them, which surprises Sage, as he thought he was still fighting Bergamot. He tells the blacksmith that that girl might die, but the fiery guy denies it. After all, that pig the girl is riding won't make that happen. It's a very famous breed, the Mahu mountain pig. They live around Mahu and are famous for their speed and stamina despite their short legs. They are one of the favorite animals of adventurers, plus they taste delicious. Despite his earlier words that the girl would not die, he jumps into the very thick of those lizards, and clearly not because he thinks that the girl will then feed him that appetizing pig of Mati. He immediately knocks out a huge number of lizards just by his appearance with his jump. This also makes the rider and the Mahu mountain pig wary and scared of what's going on behind their backs. He says that Sage is definitely right. We need to save the girl. I mean, you can't just walk past a person who's in trouble. They can't, so they have to share the goodness in their hearts. But for some reason, suspiciously during these words, a stream of drool came out of his mouth. We need to keep those pigs away from him. The girl began to worry about how things got like this, and the whole pack of lizard monsters pounced on the guy. The lizards are beyond pissed off by this behavior of the fiery guy and break out into a horrible howl. Mara also notices that, judging from the lizards' reactions, they were very angry. The fire lizard guy himself is only annoyed by the lizard's reaction to him, so he tells them all to attack at once. He also uses his hammer to the max. He grabs his magically Tabasco hammer in his hands, swings it around and yells pyrometallurgy, insanely large combustion. A huge pillar of fire shoots up into the sky from where it struck. The surviving lizardmen see this and flee while they are still alive. The blacksmith is annoyed by this and shouts at them that why the hell are they running away and that they are just a bunch of losers. But the picture of the burnt lizards around him shows that the survivors made the right choice and still had the instinct of self-preservation. When the fire guy is approached by the girl on the pig, he tells her that she almost got herself into trouble. He wasn't going to ask for anything in return, just that they hadn't had meat in a long time, and that they should have some of the stuff she was bringing. The girl, however, is filled with undisguised rage and anger at all of this. She says that she had everything under control, and he ruined everything with his appearance and antics. Mara does not understand what just happened and why she is yelling at him. The girl says everything is screwed up, and then yells that the lizards are gone, so the others can come out. And her call was answered by the people who were on the high ground and who came out of hiding. Soon the girl, sitting in the camp, tells them that things didn't go according to plan. They used themselves as bait to lure the lizards into the canyon. Then they came and ruined everything. She scolds them that after what happened today, the lizards won't come here again, even if they try to lure them, and that it's all their fault. Mara notes that's a little harsh. He's just helping her out of the goodness of his heart, but the drool from his mouth at this point just keeps on flowing. The girl tells him to wash his mouth before he talks to her, and goes off to cuddle her mountain pig Mahu. Sage, on the other hand, notices that the blacksmith isn't sorry at all that it happened that way. Another guy named Good Johnson, on the other hand, urges them to realize that in their tribe of Torah, pigs are considered sacred. He tells them that their plan was actually just to remove mobs for the dungeon, and they interrupted them. Mara is immediately interested in what the dungeon is, and the guy informs him that it's an Elegant dungeon and it's level 3. They were actually hoping to just hand these lizards over to contractors to rest soon, so they hired the local guild of wolves to destroy the lizards. But somehow this guy never heard from them again, which wasn't surprising considering that the Red Pepper Guild had already exterminated that wolves guild. Fennel, on the other hand, had already managed to steal a piece of meat somewhere. The group couldn't wait any longer, so they decided to do everything themselves since the wolves guild had disappeared. By the way, the girl who resented it the most is called Torah, and she's a raider. Mara still can't stop the incessant drooling from her mouth from hunger. Sage is wondering that it was just the four of them who were going to deal with such a huge pack of lizards. The man with the bandage brags that as long as they're all in a pile and huddled together like a pack, they're no match for them. Finally, the leader of the group, Gilbert Starnis, is introduced. It seems that his name is on the lips of many people. Mace is immediately interested, as well as Fennel, who is gnawing on meat in the background. Mara, on the other hand, wonders if he's some kind of celebrity or something, and the guy tells her he's known as Gilbert Sharp Eyes. Gilbert Sharp-Eye is a knight of the Galvatros Raiders, a 4-level dungeon master. Out of all this, Mara only reacted to the Galvatros Knights. He thought he had heard something like this somewhere before. He couldn't remember where he had heard about them. Gilbert, on the other hand, admits that he's never met them before, and that he's sorry. He wonders if they are a mercenary guild, but Mara denies it, saying that they are blacksmiths. And can't you tell right away? Gilbert is surprised. The red-haired guy is a good blacksmith, having seen their strength before, and if they are okay with it, Gilbert would like to hire them for the upcoming raid. Since they will need to travel long distances with something, Gilbert can help them with that if they succeed in the upcoming raid. They will also share the reward for clearing the dungeon. Torah, meanwhile, taps Fennel on the head. Mara agrees that it's not a bad deal, but what's the plan? But the details of the plan are of course not told to us, and it's left out of the story. The next day, Gilbert leads them to a certain place where there are already many Jashas. Mara asks him where they have come to. It seems the blacksmith didn't listen well to the plan Gilbert told them about yesterday. Are Mara and his friends not being used in some shady games? In terms of physical characteristics, Eliga wasn't the strongest boss in existence. However, the dungeon received a level 3. All from the fact that Eliga has one annoying ability, and the name of this ability is Blood Scream. Eliga screams in fear for his life, from which all his subordinates get a rather interesting buff. In fact, after activating this ability, the lizards enter rage mode and start getting physical enhancement, which turns them all into berserk warriors whose sole purpose is to protect Eliga. Gilbert talks about all of this the night before. Gilbert tells them that it turns out to be even worse than he thought. So according to his plan, they lured the lizards out of the dungeon to massacre them, but because Mara suddenly attacked them, then that plan won't work anymore. Then the blacksmith suggests that they will need to start at the first floor and work their way down, but the guy with the eye patch says it's not going to be that simple, because then this conversation wouldn't be happening at all. The moment the boss senses something suspicious in the dungeon, he buries himself in the ground. Mara notes that he's a sneaky creep, hiding while they deal with his army. Bloodcry is also a problem if they intend to defeat the boss in one fell swoop. Gud Johnson notes that this requires at least one of them to be pretty fast and able to fight. That's exactly the right job for the Hammer guys, in Mara's opinion. Guy says that Gilbert is their best archer, so the two of them will be able to prevail. The plan was as follows. They split into a vanguard and a rearguard for the breakout. The vanguard would of course be followed by them. Finally, when they got down to business, Mara uses her favorite Tabasco magic hammer, pyrometallurgy, frying some of the lizard men to a crisp. He also uses the fire stream as well. Mara clears a path for them. At this point, Fennel is having so much fun that the guy with the eye patch even has to yell at him to keep his attention. Also, for everyone to keep the momentum going. Sage, on the other hand, is new to this, even though there was a dungeon near his village, so he's trying to dodge the lizards flying at him. Mara notices this too, realizing that the guy is still not ready to conquer dungeons, and he wonders why they were so stubborn in their conversation yesterday. It turns out that during their conversation yesterday, Mara expressed his agreement, but made one condition. Since Sage is still a green rookie and has no combat skills, he wanted the guy to stay to guard the camp. However, Gilbert whispered something to the guy with the armband, and he replied that they refused and everyone should participate in this raid. Mara, of course, resented it. After all, the kid is still just a kid. However, the man stood his ground and said that they must understand they can't trust them. Since Gilbert is a famous 4-level raider, many people want to get their hands on his rewards. The blacksmith doesn't quite know what they mean, a sword or something. His sword is called sailfish. The sword can cleave absolutely anything within its radius, so until they're sure they're not bandits, they need to stick together. If they're uncomfortable with the whole thing and want to break the deal, he'll understand. But that's a non-negotiable condition. If they're worried about the boy's safety, they can provide a man. And they're asking a magician named Isitra to help with the case. But the sight of this girl doesn't make him feel safe. After thinking it over, Mara asks Sage what he thinks about all this. The assignment is very dangerous, but if they complete it, they will be given transportation, possibly in the form of a pig. After some thought, Seiji tells them that he will go with them, since he is now one of the red peppers. And so he runs, risking his life when he decides to go on a spree yesterday. He remembers that Mara not only saved his pathetic life, but he also helped his village, so he can't stay useless anymore. He wants to become strong, so strong that he can follow the blacksmith and not get in the way under his feet. So now he has to try his best. He runs as hard as he can, trying to keep up and encouraging himself. Even Fennel notices how much fortitude there is in little Sage. The boy wants to say something, but suddenly he notices a strange picture. Fennel is running, and meanwhile one of the lizards has climbed on him and is trying to bite his head. Fennel, however, when he hears what Sage told him, doesn't understand and turns back, where he notices a huge pack of lizards running after them. Mara is outraged that the lizards are still running after them and hasn't gotten loose from them. He finally makes it and jumps into the hole leading to the dungeon. However, what he saw there didn't make him very happy. Countless lizards. He had never seen so many before. He knew there were many of them, of course, but not that many. This was all starting to piss him off. He was about to use his hammer and blazing hammer strike. Suddenly, he heard someone yelling at him to get out of the way. The blacksmith somehow managed to dodge a sword that felt like it was aimed right at him. Gilbert slices through a lot of these lizards with this sword, and then in a light motion, he slices the lizards apart. Mara notes that this is what a flexible sword is, but the trajectory of this sword seemed too unpredictable to him. Everyone is surprised to see the carnage that just happened. Even little Sage was shocked that Gilbert defeated so many lizards with literally one blow. The hero who cleans up the 4-level dungeon is Gilbert the Penetrator. After all this, Mara felt like a complete idiot for some reason. Gilbert shares his observation with his subordinate that the lizards aren't getting any smaller. Gilbert decides to go downstairs, so he leaves the guy with the eye patch in charge. The subordinate understands his orders. The blacksmith, on the other hand, Gilbert calls Gilbert with him, and that they will go with him to Eliga. Then how's the main guy? Guy orders Isitra to get down to business. Using a few stones from her bag, the girl attached them to various points in the dungeon. She then summoned Sage and informed him that the shield was ready. The guy with the armband says that she did a good job and that she has to hold the given shield at all costs. He puts on special gloves and then seals one of the lizards to the ground, with his gloves emitting light like lightning. He then informs the others that the vanguard has left to fight Eliga, which means that the lizards here will soon turn into berserk. Torah, crossbow in hand, is only too happy to hear such news, the pig beneath her also grunting merrily. Their job is to protect the passageway, no matter what the circumstances, to keep the lizards from sneaking in. They must wait for the moment when Gilbert finishes off Eliga, but until then, they must clench their teeth and hold on. In the meantime, the blacksmith's inner premonition informs him that something is wrong with Gilbert. So what is Gilbert up to in his shadowy games? Fennel grabs his axes and rushes at the enemies in front of him. He chops the lizards one by one, leaving them no chance. Fennel is so happy that this is so easy because they just need to block the path so that the lizards don't all run to the boss. Fennel decides that they will complete the task like true warriors. Mace is already tired of his chatter and asks the guy to shut up. After looking at the whole situation and being on the battlefield, Torah notices that she thought only the captain out of the whole company of newcomers was capable of anything. But she is surprised that the others are good too. Torah is unwilling to give in to the foreigners, and so she sends along Rodrigo into battle. She uses her tactical attack and energy shield and runs into the lizardmen in a head-on collision. Torah then jumped upwards to the surprised looks of the lizardmen, who didn't realize what was happening. In flight, Torah used a rain of arrows to deal with many lizards at once. Sage watched all this fighting while standing behind a magical shield. This was all new to him. The only thing on his mind was making sure Mara was okay. The naive Sage boy wished that no one would get hurt in this fight and that everyone would be happy. However, Gilbert was up to some shady game, so there was no reason to hope for that. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.